It's time for a TIE pilot update. That intro was the stupidest thing I've probably ever done. But welcome back to Blue's Armory, where today we are doing an update on the TIE pilot costume that I'm building for the 501st. So, when I started this channel, my intention was to take people through the process of building a 501st approved costume, which I had all the intentions of doing, and then my printer died. So that got put on hold, which is why we did a Mandalorian costume wrap-up thing in the last video that I did. But the printer is fixed. I got the heat bed repaired on it. Elegoo sent me a brand new heat bed and I installed it, which you can have a look at on YouTube Shorts, where I made a little short about putting my printer back together. But we can finally get back to building the TIE pilot costume, and oh boy, have I been busy. So far we pretty much have printed out everything that we needed. This was over the span of maybe a week, just over a week of printing out the bits for the helmet, because my printer is not big enough to print everything in one go, so we started printing in pieces. So we printed the pieces for the chest, and then we printed the pieces for the back as well. So there are a few more details that we need to print as well, but the majority of it is printed. And what happens after you print something, you start the process of sanding, which is everyone's favorite process. This is taking a while. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the process of putting together the TIE pilot costume to where we're at now.
So the first thing to do when you're putting together a 501st costume is to look through the CRLs. Now, the CRLs are basically the costume requirements that you need to hit and apply to join the 501st. I had to look through quite a few different TIE pilots, as there is quite a few on the 501st website. There's Rebels, there's Squadrons, there's Andor, there's Rogue One, there's Original Trilogy. I eventually settled on the Rogue One / Solo because I think those are the coolest looking TIE pilots. Next up, I had to find some STLs. Luckily, I was part of the Galactic Army Patreon already, and one of their specialist rewards was the TIE pilot costume, so I've settled on those. Once we've done that, we take all of the wonderful files that we have and put them into our slicing software to shape them up and size them and get them sliced ready to go onto the 3D printer. This is basically taking different parts, making sure that they fit on the size print bed that I have on the Elegoo Neptune 4 Pro, which sometimes takes a bit of wiggling around to figure out what's going to be the easiest and fastest way to print, but we just about managed to get all the prints for the helmet to fit on there at about 100% scale. Then we slice up, chuck it onto a USB stick, and then it goes straight into the printer. As you can see here, it's being printed. So the printing process took about a week, maybe 2 weeks, to print off all the helmet parts and most of the armor parts. I like to film the printing because I think it's quite fun to watch, but this is a long, laborious process where you just have to be patient. It's fun to watch, but you have to be patient. Eventually we got there in the end, all the pieces printed off. Having those Stormtrooper faceplates printing is just one of the coolest things ever. I always do a quick test with tape just to see if it works. Here's me looking ridiculous. And then we moved on to the armor pieces after the helmet was done. My first go at the chest plates was actually, I thought, too small. So we actually ended up reprinting it and sizing it up to about 115%. Now, one thing with 3D printing is accidents can happen, and this happened when I came home from work, which is, annoying, but that happens with 3D printing sometime. So after we've done all the printing, we move on to the priming and sanding stage. So I tried a different technique with this. Usually I would fill a primer and sand and fill a primer. This time we went with a mix of putty or filler and water and alcohol to try and cover all the pieces after I'd given them a rough sand with about 60 grit sandpaper on the electric sander. This kind of filled in quite a lot of the layer lines, and then once I sanded it, it actually knocked back quite a few. This did take a lot of sanding afterwards, and it was a very messy experience, but I actually think this technique worked quite well, and I'd be willing to try it as like an A/B test versus just the filler primering. It does produce quite a lot of dust though, so be careful about that. So the prints were looking pretty smooth, but there's a lot of work to go. The next stage was to hit them with some filler primer to clear up, again, get over that filler. Once we've done that, we left those to dry and went to gluing together the chest pieces. I thought the chest and the back would be the easiest to sand and work on once they've been all glued together, as opposed to the helmet, which I preferred to do in parts. But basically what we do here is we rough up the edges. We just hit it with some super glue and then hit it with some activator. And then later on, I will show you how, well, in fact, next I'll show you how we make those even stronger. So what I do is I take a soldering iron, get it super hot, get some spare filament that I have lying around, that I'm sure if you have a 3D printer you have lying around, and then just reinforce those seams to make sure that they're nice and solid and tough. After that, I always like to give myself a little bit of a boost. I printed a test chest box and put it over the chest to see what it would look like, and you know, that really gets you motivated for the rest of the project when you can see things coming together. Putting together the back plate was a little bit more difficult, I suppose. I think I messed up the lining a little bit, so that's going to take some real work when we go back to sanding. But after this, we had both the chest and the back all glued together, so I just got to fill in those pesky seams. Back to the helmet, we went with a slightly more watered down putty filler mixture, and then decided that the back part of the helmet wasn't going to be that difficult to sand when it was separated, so I decided to glue them together anyway to save me having to do it later. And again with the filler, again with the 3D printing filament, that's the word, to try and get that. We gave everything a wet sand the other day just to get it nice and smooth, and that's about as far as we have come at this point.
So this is where we're kind of at now with some of the pieces, is that we've printed everything out and then glued them all together and sanded them and started filling them. Biggest thing I'm struggling with at the moment is filling in the seams. Obviously where I've glued things together, they haven't quite been aligned properly, so we're having to build up that and sand it so it's all smooth. Another thing that I like to do that I learned from Frankly Builds is 3D printing welding, which is a process of once you've super glued everything together to make it extra strong, we then go in with some spare filament that we have and pretty much just weld in to the gaps and get the soldering iron right in there with a nice hot soldering iron and create a super, super strong bond so that our prints are never going to come apart. So, the hard part's pretty easy. I know how to build armor. I've done a couple of Mando kits now, well, 3 to be precise. I've kind of got the process of putting together 3D printed parts. Next up, once we finish off with all the sanding, or in tandem, is sourcing the soft parts. And once I kind of understand what I'm doing with that and I've got some more pieces, I will do an update with you and tell you how I found them. But I am, again, trying to do this as budget friendly as possible. I know there are some amazing creators that a lot of people have recommended, Crow Pops and Moncal Prop Shop on Etsy. They look like incredible makers and produce some really high quality stuff, but they're quite expensive because it's high quality stuff. So I've decided to try and do this as cheap as possible, and I will let you know once I find a solution to that. So here's a few more pieces that I've been working on with the TIE Pilot helmet. Firstly, one of the things that was just awesome to put together and see coming off the print bed is the faceplate, or as I should say, faceplate. This is super cool. I am a massive original trilogy fan. Those are the Star Wars films that I watched first and then I grew up on before my love of the clones and the prequels came about. Having this come off the printer, which is basically, I mean, no, pretty much the TIE Pilot helmet is an X-Wing helmet mixed in with a Stormtrooper faceplate. So to see a Stormtrooper faceplate come off my printer is awesome. So we're really trying to get these parts as smooth as possible, because that TIE Pilot costume is gloss black and there ain't no hiding any imperfections. At least with like the Mando over there, like if I fuck it up, that's on me and I can cover it up with weathering. Whereas with these pieces, they're gonna have to be gloss smooth before I can go into paint. So we're putting a little bit more time and effort into sanding and priming and making sure all those imperfections are finished before we go in. I've pretty much gotten rid of all the layer lines. Like I'd say 90% of the layer lines. Now we're just trying to get rid of those little pockets and imperfections that you might be able to see. There's a few little pockets of imperfections and dings and dents that I just want to get super smooth before we go in and add any paint. So I reckon I've got another week or two of sanding and priming and filling and all that jazz before we can then go into paint. My goal with this costume is before May 4th, Star Wars Day, is I want to have this done and at least my approval sent off. I don't have to be approved by May 4th, but I'd like to have it finished. And I think we're on a pretty good way. The backplate, we haven't even really started. I tested some I tried filling this before I was sanding it. I thought it might be a fun experiment. It didn't work and it's really dusty, but the backplate looks so cool. I recently jumped back and played a bit of Star Wars Squadrons, and that's just got me even more excited for this TIE pilot costume. But that's about it for an update. I'm gonna try and make these updates a little bit more regular, but there's plenty of YouTube shorts going up if you wanna follow along a little bit more regularly with these builds. Like I said, it's been a long time of sanding and priming and filling. But I feel like we're finally getting somewhere with this costume, and seeing all the pieces laid out in front of me is super exciting, and I'm so excited. This is going to be such a comfortable costume to wear. Like, it's a jumpsuit and a little bit of armor. It's not like jumping into a full Django kit or Mando kit or like, I don't know, Stormtrooper, where you're just in a bucket of sweat. This one looks like it's going to be pretty comfortable. So I'm really excited for that, and I'm just excited to put on an Imperial costume for pretty much the first time. So that'll do it for this update. I'll try and get you an update when I have something more to update, but until then, why not subscribe and follow along and watch the YouTube shorts. Let me know if you've got any questions. You can ask me down in the comments below. I will be sure to answer anyone's questions. And if you'd like to follow me on Instagram, I do post a little bit of crafting stuff and cosplay stuff on there, but I'll catch you on the next update. Thank you very much for watching. Happy crafting. See you later.